Dr. Rathod, Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpara speech clearly redefined Indian nationalism. How did he connect it to Sanatan Dharma?
Aurobindo saw nationalism as deeply intertwined with Sanatan Dharma, the eternal truth. He argued that India's identity wasn't based on Western political constructs but its spiritual heritage. This approach transformed the freedom movement into a quest for cultural and spiritual revival alongside political liberation.
It's fascinating how he combined spirituality with nationalism. Can you share an example of this integration in action?
Certainly, during his imprisonment, Aurobindo had profound spiritual realizations which he shared in his speech. He emphasized that India's struggle was not just political but also a spiritual mission, urging people to see it as a divine duty aligned with Sanatan Dharma.
However, critics argue that spirituality could detract from tangible political goals. How do you address this counterargument?
Aurobindo believed that spirituality enriched the political struggle by providing moral guidance and resilience. He saw the integration of karma action with dharma, righteous duty, as essential for a holistic approach, ensuring the movement remained grounded in ethical principles and divine purpose.
Moving to decolonization, Aurobindo's perspective was unique. How did he view it beyond mere political independence?
Aurobindo critiqued British colonial rule as imposing materialistic values that were alien to India's spiritual culture. For him, true decolonization meant reviving India's spiritual ethos, which had been suppressed. He emphasized the need to reject servility to foreign ideals and reconnect with India's ancient traditions.
That's a profound stance. Can you provide a real-world application of this idea during the freedom movement?
Absolutely. The Swadeshi movement, which encouraged Indians to boycott British goods and revive indigenous industries, was a manifestation of Aurobindo's ideals. It wasn't just an economic strategy but a cultural revival, emphasizing pride in Indian products and traditions.
Some argue that focusing on cultural revival might lead to cultural isolationism. What's your take on this?
Aurobindo saw cultural revival not as isolation but as a means to strengthen national identity. By reclaiming cultural pride, India could engage with the world from a position of strength and authenticity, contributing its unique spiritual insights to global discourse.
Dr. Rathod, Aurobindo introduced the intriguing concept of the nation soul. Could you elaborate on this?
Aurobindo envisioned India as a living spiritual entity, the nation soul, with a divine mission. He believed colonial rule disrupted this soul and decolonization was essential for its restoration. This idea gave the freedom movement a cosmic dimension, framing it as a spiritual renaissance.
Such a perspective certainly expands the scope of nationalism. Can you share an anecdote illustrating this concept?
During his speeches, Aurobindo often spoke of India's destiny to guide humanity toward enlightenment. He saw the freedom struggle as a spiritual awakening where each participant contributed to the nation's divine purpose, much like cells revitalizing a body.
Critics might argue that such grand visions could overshadow practical concerns. How do you see this tension?
Aurobindo's vision provided a moral compass and unity, essential for sustaining long-term struggles. While practical strategies were vital, his spiritual framework kept the movement focused on higher ideals, preventing it from descending into mere political opportunism.
Finally, Dr. Rathod, how does Aurobindo's fusion of spirituality and nationalism resonate in today's context?
Aurobindo's legacy is evident in modern India's ongoing journey towards self-realization. His ideas inspire contemporary leaders to integrate moral and spiritual values into governance, ensuring progress aligns with ethical and cultural principles.
Some might argue that spirituality in politics could blur lines between religion and state. How would Aurobindo address such concerns?
Aurobindo distinguished between spirituality as a universal ethos and organized religion. He advocated for a secular state guided by spiritual values like compassion and justice, ensuring inclusivity while fostering a sense of shared moral purpose.
Sri Aurobindo's imprisonment in the Alipore jail was not just a physical ordeal, but a turning point in his spiritual path. Can you elaborate on how this period became transformative for him?
Certainly, during his year in solitary confinement, Aurobindo engaged in deep meditation and introspection. This solitude allowed him to detach from political turmoil and focus on inner experiences, fostering a profound spiritual awakening.
That's intriguing. I've heard he experienced mystical visions during this time. Could you share more about these experiences and their impact on his spiritual philosophy?
While in jail, Aurobindo reported perceiving the divine presence of Vasudeva, or Shri Krishna, in everything around him. This realization of divinity even in jail bars and guards was pivotal in shaping his spiritual philosophy.
However, skeptics might argue that such experiences are subjective and lack empirical evidence. How did Aurobindo address such skepticism?
Aurobindo believed that spiritual truths, much like scientific discoveries, require direct personal experience. He argued that skepticism stems from a lack of experiential understanding and encouraged individuals to explore spirituality themselves.
Looking forward, how did these experiences lay the groundwork for his later teachings, particularly his philosophy of integral yoga?
The insights gained during imprisonment became the foundation for integral yoga, which harmonizes physical, mental, and spiritual existence with the divine. This holistic approach aims to transform life on earth, not just individual liberation.
Moving on to the Uttarpara speech, Dr. Rathod, how did Aurobindo redefine nationalism through this address?
Aurobindo reimagined nationalism as intrinsically linked to Sanatan Dharma, the eternal religion. He stated that India's spiritual heritage and national identity were intertwined, with nationalism being a manifestation of Sanatan Dharma.
It's a profound shift from political to spiritual emphasis. But could such a definition alienate those who view nationalism as a secular political movement?
Indeed, some critics argue that mixing religion with nationalism could marginalize non-Hindu communities. However, Aurobindo emphasized the universality of Sanatan Dharma, transcending religious boundaries and focusing on spiritual inclusivity.
In today's world, where nationalism often leads to divisiveness, how can Aurobindo's vision guide contemporary movements?
Aurobindo's vision encourages a unifying nationalism rooted in shared spiritual values, promoting collective progress and harmony. His ideas inspire movements to integrate cultural heritage with universal human values, fostering global unity.
Dr. Rathod, Sri Aurobindo spoke of India's mission as a spiritual leader. How did he envision India's role in the global spiritual landscape?
Aurobindo believed that India's freedom was not just for its own sake but to serve humanity by spreading spiritual truths. He envisioned India as a beacon of spirituality, guiding the world towards enlightenment and peace.
While this vision is noble, some argue that it places an unrealistic burden on India. How did Aurobindo address the nation's practical challenges in achieving this role?
Aurobindo acknowledged India's socioeconomic challenges but saw them as opportunities for spiritual growth. He argued that India's spiritual resurgence would naturally lead to solutions for material and social issues.
In the future, how can India balance its spiritual aspirations with its developmental needs?
India can integrate spiritual principles with modern innovation to create a balanced approach to development. By fostering ethical leadership and holistic education, India can progress materially while fulfilling its spiritual mission.
Finally, Dr. Rathod, Sri Aurobindo emphasized unity through divine will. How did he perceive the diverse forces at play in India's freedom struggle?
Aurobindo viewed both proponents and opponents of India's freedom as instruments of a larger divine plan. He believed that all forces, knowingly or unknowingly, contributed to the realization of India's spiritual destiny.
This perspective of unity is quite inclusive. But in practical terms, how did Aurobindo suggest fostering unity among diverse groups?
Aurobindo advocated for a shared spiritual vision that transcends differences. He encouraged individuals to recognize their role in a divine play, fostering cooperation and understanding beyond political or religious divides.
Looking ahead, how can this idea of unity through divine will influence modern societal conflicts?
By adopting a spiritual perspective, societies can focus on common goals and mutual respect. This approach can transform conflicts into opportunities for growth, promoting peace and collaboration in an increasingly interconnected world.